Hi, I'm Raquel Valdelamar, and welcome to the Mega Podcast, where I speak with influential and noteworthy people on how they achieve their professional dreams while maintaining balance throughout their lives. Today, I am with Cristi. Chris is the evening air reporter for ABC Eyewitness News. Since moving to Los Angeles in 2014, Chris has enjoyed a bird's-eye view of Southern California while reporting over breaking news. In addition to weather and traffic, he has included police chases, wildfires, and shootings in his reporting. In 2016, Chris received a Radio and Television News Association Award for his live coverage reporting over the Cajun Pass brush fire, which consumed an entire stretch of freeway traffic. Born and raised in Florida, Chris graduated from the University of Central Florida and worked for NASA at the Kennedy Space Center. Following his work during the tragic Space Shuttle Columbia disaster in 2003, Chris went on to launch his helicopter reporting career at Fox in Orlando and later at WSVN in Miami. In 2005, as Hurricane Rita ravaged the Texas coastline, Chris flew on special assignment for CBS News and chronicled the hurricane as an airborne photojournalist. In the years since, Chris has traveled the world and interviewed newsmakers and celebrities for various entertainment outlets. Prior to living in LA, Chris spent several years reporting for Fox 5 in New York City, where he covered historic moments such as the 2005 MTA subway strike and the U.S. Airways Flight 1549 Miracle on the Hudson. Chris is married and has an 18-month-old daughter that he loves reading Disney books to.
That's right.
Chris, welcome to the Mega Podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. So my first question is, how did you get to become a helicopter reporter? That is a dream job for most young boys, especially. So many of my brothers thought it was so cool to be a helicopter reporter.
It is a dream job. It really is. And I always, even as a young child, knew I wanted to be in television. Knew I was fascinated by the news, wanted to be a reporter at a very early age.
How did that happen? Was it just watching the TV news?
It was. I watched my fair share of sitcoms and cartoons, but I would say by 10 years old.
Really?
I was pretty glued.
You knew at 10 years old, you had that calling.
Local news, but then there was like the Gulf War and the OJ chase, which was very influential.
Yeah.
I followed the OJ trial minute by minute at 14, 15 years old, sneaking updates wherever I can on the radio in class. And it was an obsession at one point.
Who were your favorite news reporters, would you say? When you were young, I remember following like Barbara Walters and Mike Wallace and Diane Sawyer. There was always an element of like trust that I felt they all had. Who would you say were your like favorite reporters?
And it's changed so much, but back then it was these few, the Peter Jennings, the Barbara Walters, like you said, Katie Couric, Matt Lauer, all of these guys. There were these dapper personalities who had this amazing career with a front row seat to history. And they saw it all and traveling the world. I love traveling.
Yeah.
And I love meeting interesting people. You're meeting the most interesting people in the world, the most interesting newsmakers in the world, whether it's, a politician or a celebrity or whatever the case may be. I'm at a very early age in high school still, which is where I had my first job. My first 2 weeks on the job, I interviewed Donald Trump and O.J. Simpson.
No way. Hold on a second. How old were you when you interviewed Donald Trump and O.J. Simpson?
About a senior in high school, so roughly 18 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just happenstance. Donald Trump was on a red carpet.
Right.
He had just started dating Melania.
Wow.
O.J. Simpson had just started house hunting in Miami. I was working for the ABC affiliate in Miami, and
so you were like a news reporter for.
I wasn't even a reporter. I was a young assignment desk assistant.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I was actually started behind the camera as a camera operator, and would hang out at the assignment desk, and they would send me on stories.
And this was for like a news station that you were doing?
ABC in Miami. Yeah, so it was like
at 18 years old.
Yeah, I would literally get out of school and then shoot down in Miami and do studio camera for the 11 o'clock news.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how you got into the whole field of reporting.
Yeah.
And then how did get into the helicopter? Because I'm sure there's such a difference. To be not just a reporter, but then getting into helicopter.
Yeah, that came a little bit later on. I was in college doing traffic on the radio at first. And then one day, the company that I was working for, Metro Traffic, they had a helicopter that they would lease to the different TV stations. So they would use the picture from the helicopter, and I would do the traffic from the helicopter.
Yeah.
At one point, my boss said, "How would you like to learn how to shoot? Operate the camera from the helicopter," which at that time, and still in many positions today, it's a multitasking job of reporting and shooting at the same time.
Right.
And so I started doing that. And one day, actually, the Space Shuttle Columbia, the day of the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster, I was sent out to the airport to get in the helicopter.
Wow.
And they threw me on television.
Wow.
So that was kind of a big break.
And you had to not only just learn everything about reporting, but then learning a helicopter. I did realize how
I didn't fly it, but it was navigate. You're still navigating. Right. At that time, there was no GPS, so you had it wasn't just a camera; it was a stack of map books.
Wow, that's incredible.
Like this high, and you're helping the pilot navigate. Mm-hmm. I knew I was fascinated by aviation even earlier, but never dreamed of combining reporting and flying. I mean, I had been to my first air show at 15 years old in Fort Lauderdale on the beach, and would watch these Thunderbirds and Blue Angels, and I'm like, man, maybe I don't want to go into TV. Maybe I'd rather go into the Navy. That lasted for like a split second. I also didn't have the 20/20 vision at that time that you needed to be a pilot, but lo and behold, I would end up doing both, getting to fly and report. So in that way, it really is a dream job.
That is. I mean, it really is. And what do you think it requires to be a really good reporter? Not even like just a helicopter reporter, because I'm sure there's different skill sets that you need for that. But to be a good reporter nowadays, what do you think is critical? And is it different than what it was during like the Peter Jennings sort of days?
It's changed, but the principles are the same. I mean, you have to be obsessed with facts. Mm-hmm. You have to be grounded in the facts. And unfortunately, so many journalists and journalistic institutions have strayed from that core principle. Many try, and most of the mainstream media organizations really are at their core, filled with good journalists, who have been trained and, want to inform the public. I mean, that's what it is. It's a public service at the end of the day, informing the audience, storytelling, but grounded in fact. And so as long as you're grounded in fact, and I think you have to have a mastery of the English language to be able to communicate.
Right.
I think those are the two most important things. I mean,
and I also think trust, like being able to just, maintain your credibility and your reputation.
And maintaining that trust.
Yeah.
Building that trust with the audience and maintaining it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take much for that trust to evaporate if you get caught, delivering a story that maybe, was lacking in fact.
So tell me a little bit about your journey to LA. I mean, you've done so many, you've worked with NASA, to New York, and you've covered some incredible events in like New York, like just how has your journey like to LA kind of shaped you as a reporter?
It's been a winding road. I grew up in South Florida, so I went to school in Orlando, ended up moving to Miami, and then had a big opportunity during the subway strike in 2005.
And that was in New York,
That was in New York.
Yeah.
Got a call. The Fox station in New York was in a pinch, so about 24, 48 hours later, I found myself on Good Day New York, and that turned into a big break.
Yeah.
And that was exciting.
And it's interesting too, like it's these little moments. Like I've always said that like the doors of your future can be as unassuming as they are unexpected. And it's about like capitalizing on these little moments and like that you're not exactly prepared for. You don't know it's going to come, but then it's like it comes, and then you're like, that gives you your big break. I mean, in speaking with so many people, I see that over and over again. But so it's timing, but it's a bit of luck, but then it's like learning to do something with that luck that comes your way.
Having the ability to take advantage of the opportunities when they come. And not everybody gets those opportunities. That's the problem, is that you could be really qualified and really smart and a fabulous reporter or at whatever you do. And if you're not at the right place at the right time, sometimes, those opportunities can go missed, and you have to be ready for those.
Yeah, no, Elon Musk said that luck is the biggest superpower. if you can have luck, but then it's knowing what to do with that luck.
Exactly.
It doesn't happen very often. I mean, many times it doesn't happen, but when it does, I mean, I think that I've seen just reading your bio and just reading about you, I feel like, God, you like all those little lucky breaks that you got, like you actually you leveraged it and you really tried to just make
Funny
use of
story
it.
about that. I had a full-time job reporting the traffic for Fox in Miami at the time that Hurricane Rita was heading towards Houston at the time. And it was right after Katrina.
Yeah.
And there was this thought that it would be the next Katrina, maybe worse because Houston's such a big city. They started evacuating the entire city of Houston.
Okay.
And I got this call to see if I wanted to take this opportunity and fly out to Texas and freelance for CBS. So I had to make a decision, a split-second decision, really, to virtually quit my full-time day job at 25 years old, which was already a pretty good job, to take this national opportunity that may or may not pan out. Who knows if the hurricane changes directions? I mean, it's a temporary assignment. It was a full-time job, leaving that for a temporary assignment on a hope and a prayer that it would turn into something even bigger. And I came back from Houston with no job. And it was directly related to some of the opportunities that came along just within weeks and months after that. But still, it was a big gamble.
You chose to go down to Houston to actually cover this event that may or may not would happen because it was weather related.
Yeah.
It was, and then when you came back, you're like, I have no job. I mean, that's a big risk.
And I had no job.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was like 25, no job.
Yeah.
I have, and in this business, you don't know where the next job is going to be because it's a fickle industry. I mean, at that time, I wasn't under any kind of contract or anything. And the hurricane did change directions. It ended up steering away from Houston in the Gulf, still into like the Louisiana-Texas border.
Were you able to cover it?
Covered it, and it was a fantastic experience. But it was short-lived. I mean, I think I was there for a couple weeks, and
but it's making that split-second decision, and then that can change the whole direction of your career.
Yeah, it was a gamble.
Yeah.
But it was a leap of faith too.
Yeah. Well, I think so. Right now, that gamble seemed to have paid off.
It's paid off.
It doesn't always pay off.
It doesn't always pay off, but it was just weeks later that I would have that opportunity in New York, which is the #1 market in the country, and my big market dreams as a young kid in Miami.
You need to be in the big markets.
Came true. And even though New York is #1 demographically, when it comes to what I do, breaking news, spot news, helicopter news coverage, there really is nothing like LA, to answer your question. I mean, LA was always kind of this.
Really?
It had this, maybe it was based on my obsession with the OJ trial and the OJ saga.
How would you describe the difference between New York, like reporting, and LA reporting?
Well, growing up in the 90s, LA was always in the news. I mean, for whatever it was, LA was just consistently in the national spotlight. And so I had always been enamored with LA, and LA, it's the geography, it's the fires, it's the earthquakes, it's the celebrity, Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, police chases. We have an obsession in the city with
really
police chases. And not only in the city, but people now with streaming will stream from all over the world just to stay up on a Friday night and watch a police chase.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that in New York or anywhere else in the world.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's very, very unique. Yeah.
That's so, I mean, I love this city. I mean, I've been here for 12 years, but I never really thought about it from kind of like the reporting side of it, how it has its own sort of just dynamic as just.
Absolutely.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things that it dawned on me as I was preparing for this was you get such an extreme adrenaline rush in what you do. Like your work life is literally just filled with just these extreme adrenaline rushes. I mean, from like car chases, shootings. I mean, some of it is morbid, but some of it's also exciting. So how does can you just talk about some of those like reporting events that where you're like goosebumps, you had that just like made you that adrenaline rush.
It's an adrenaline rush.
It really is.
But the adrenaline is more of a byproduct of my function, right? Like I am so in the moment. I am so focused on collecting the facts, gathering the information, relaying the information accurately.
So you have to be really calm and measured.
I have to
when
be
you're in that, it's like
in a
extreme,
zone.
like extreme.
Absolutely. And I'm navigating with the pilot. I'm talking to my photographer.
Yeah.
I'm talking to the assignment desk. I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter. I'm gathering information all kinds of different ways. And I'm looking out the window. I'm looking into a video monitor, painting a picture for the viewer of what's happening in real time.
Yeah.
There's no script. There's no notes. Very few notes. So it's a matter of, being able to, tell a story on the fly. No pun intended.
So to our viewers who are just getting to know you, like describe an event that you were reporting and what it's like to that really gave you that adrenaline rush, and how you had to like go through and be really calm and measured and collected while you're dealing with its extreme event.
Yeah. I mean, there's one chase actually that comes to mind right away. It's one of these, once in I don't want to say once in a lifetime, but once, every few years you get a chase like we had a few years ago, which was a stolen RV, a woman driving crazily through the San Fernando Valley. She had two huge dogs in her lap. Oh, wow. And she just paved a path of destruction, crashing into things.
Really?
Wiping out other, running red lights, wiping out other cars. She ended up crashing. One of the dogs jumps out of the RV in the middle of the chase. It was one of these wild, unpredictable chases. People were glued. And it was about as exciting as a chase gets. Yeah. I don't even think about the adrenaline until at the end of the day when I go to recap, everything that just happened. That I really kind of, absorb it. Because in the moment, like I said, the adrenaline's pumping, but that's kind of what's giving you the ability to keep calm, cool, and collected. Right. And not like, Right. You have to find the words in real time to tell this story, because people are hanging on your words in addition to the pictures. Yeah. So it's rewarding in that respect. But the adrenaline doesn't really start to level off until after it's all over.
You don't even realize it. You don't even realize it until the, and then like that's when you're trying to go home. Let's say you go home after the end of the workday where you're reporting on something like this, and like what do you like? How do you find that balance between you just reported this incredible car chase scene. Yeah. And then you're going home now and just like, how's your, tell me about your day, your lovely wife. And just, how do you balance the ordinary life against this backdrop of this extreme adrenaline rush of just the shootings, wildfires, car chases that you have to do? And then, there's regular reporting too, but it is quite a difference.
There's days where, like we just talked about, I will recap it and replay it, and I'll critique myself. Yeah. I'll rewatch it some nights. I'll go home and actually rewatch, and either I'll be really proud of myself or I'll be really like hard on myself. There's other nights where I can't remember what I've done all day. I may have flown over a crash, a fire, a police chase, and 10 other things, and I can't even remember because I'm not even thinking about it. I go into a completely different zone where I just pour a drink and relax, or watch TV and,
You have to do something. Like, you have to do something that's the antithesis of that. Is that what do? You just like basically veg out a bit, sit in front of the TV, just kind of like, absolutely. I know.
The pressure is on when I'm on television. But when I get home, the beauty of the job is I get to leave work.
Well, you have a different kind of pressure. And I want to get to that. I want to get to that. But it is a different kind of pressure and responsibility.
But I don't have to bring it home, which is
you do. And that's a really, and that's a skill of like how not to bring. But I want to get into that actually, because like, you covered just the Challenger, the
Columbia.
The Columbia blow up. I mean, so many of these shootings, terrorist attacks. Mm-hmm. How do you, in a way, I sometimes think it's almost like a war veteran, going and seeing, like going to a war zone and then coming back home and then trying to adjust to civilian life.
Yeah, I would never compare it to a war fighter, especially what I do, because in a sense,
you're safe.
And right? I've done some ground reporting, and I've seen some of the blood and the really depressing stuff up close, and that's a bit different. See, the reporters on the ground are in a little bit of a different position, side by side with first responders many times, seeing all of that up close. So there is some safety being in that bubble up in the sky, but oftentimes we fly in, helicopter in, cover the story, inform the viewer, and then fly away. And so there's something that's a little bit detached in that kind of reporting.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say I never have nightmares. I don't have any kind of post-traumatic stress, but it's definitely something that, I mean, we see, horrible things on a regular basis, whether it's dead bodies or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And how do you try to find just maintain the positivity in yourself and your outlook in life? Because it is something that I've seen is you're reporting. I mean, that's just being news. You have to report on a lot of negative stuff.
I take the good with the bad, because at the end of the day, collectively, I love what I do. That's important. On top of that, I work hard, but I also play hard. So I'm all about going home and having the best time with my wife and my daughter, and we have the most amazing weekends, and we go on fabulous vacations, and that's really what kind of keeps me sane.
That's important. Well, let's talk about that. So let's talk about your family and what you have. How long have you been married?
Been married for 12 years this month.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What are you guys going to do for your anniversary?
We have a nice date night planned.
Nice.
Yeah.
How often do you guys do date night?
Pretty regularly.
Really? That's so important.
It's extremely important.
That's so important. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
I love hearing that. So you have 12 years and you have an 18-month-old daughter.
Yeah.
And
she's amazing.
What's her name?
Aspen.
Aspen?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that name.
Yeah.
And just what has it been like to just be a father? I mean, it's just, are you sleeping at nights?
Pretty lucky in the sleep department, but good. It has changed everything.
Really?
I mean, it really has. And, with my schedule, I work evenings, like you mentioned. So I make the most of my time with her in the morning. That's where I find,
So you spend time with her in the morning. You would say that's kind of the time that you are.
Yep. Okay. Yep. She's daddy's girl in the morning. So we go to the beach and we take walks, and she loves getting on the bike.
Nice.
She's got the bike seat and she just loves it. So that's, whether we're watching cartoons or on the bike, it's quality time.
So before that, how, before you had her, let's just talk, what would you and your wife do? Like, how would you spend your time, with family, and using family time? This is family time, and then this is work time. You talk about vacations, you have date nights, we're
big foodies, so we love,
great.
We love, whether it's a new burger joint or a nice new restaurant, we love sampling, especially here in LA where we have such great food.
Yeah.
We love eating out. We love spending time with our friends.
That's important.
Spending time with family wherever we get the chance. Most of our family's back east, but we try to get back east as often as we can too. So that's great. I mean, those are the things that really help me balance,
that's important.
The stress.
So being married 12 years, what would you say is like the secret to a happy relationship?
Those date nights are pretty
really?
important.
Okay, everyone that's married. After 5 years, I know a lot of people, they start to let that go.
No, you cannot.
So have date nights.
Crucial.
Was it one night, 2 nights a week?
At least every other week. But I mean, not only, I mean, she's off. I mean, she, Aspen will join us,
Good.
we have.
And now there's Aspen joining.
Absolutely. Okay. Sometimes.
And what's your wife's name?
Marissa.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Aspen joins you and Marissa.
Yep. And we have family nights and we have date nights where it's just the two of us.
That's great.
And, like I said, Saturday comes and we make the most of the weekends.
And when it's just the date night, do you have a nanny or a babysitter take care of you guys? Okay, that's good.
Which is hard because we don't have family here.
Right. And that is
we're lucky to have.
I know, and just that's a big thing. I mean, I've been in LA for 12 years, and it's just one of the things I've seen is so many people are transients. I mean, they're not from here and they don't have family here. So it's a lot tougher to have a family and then do these things like having date nights and just having a babysitter and taking time for each other and just yourself, when it's just you don't have the support system
It takes effort.
It does.
Yeah.
It really does. So what is your sleep and exercise routine now, would you say?
Oh, it's changed.
Really?
It's
okay,
changed.
So what was it like before? Because you seem like very fit. You have to be.
Well, I try. It's always it's a work in progress. But I try and drink a lot of water. Living near the beach, coming from the East Coast 8 years ago has been life-changing. I love whether it's biking on the beach, walking the beach. That's my morning routine.
Really?
I will get my coffee, throw on a podcast, and get to the beach to find peace.
So that's
kind
of your alone time.
To move and stay active. And
How often would you say you do that?
Try to do it every day,
That's
almost
great.
every day.
That's wonderful. So you wake up in the morning, since you get so you do your evening, so you do your mornings. You take this like morning time for yourself. You'll go to the beach.
Yep.
Have a podcast.
Yep.
And then just
usually try and squeeze in some lunch with my wife before work.
Nice.
I'll get Aspen to daycare, and then off we go.
That's great.
Yeah. They're asleep when I get home, so I have quiet time when I get home.
What time? Like, so what time?
I usually get home around midnight.
Okay, you get around midnight, and then what time do you go to work?
And I go in around 1 o'clock.
Around 1 o'clock. So it's literally almost like a 12-hour.
Yeah.
It's a 12-hour. So it's a very intense workday, and when you're on, like, you have to be super on.
Sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no such thing as like, mailing it in on TV. You really have to be on point.
What happens when there's not like a heavy news day? Like if it's, I think I always think about the big, events, but then there's always like, there's just not a big heavy news day.
Some of the slower news days are some of our busiest days because you still have to fill a newscast. And so the best way to get those, even if they're not big stories, there are a lot of little stories that you can only get to by helicopter. So those turns out to sometimes be busy days. And some days we don't fly that much. It's really unpredictable. I never know what I'm facing when I go into work. I could be flying 7 hours today when I get in, or I might fly for an hour.
And I think that is why, like, having that morning routine of going to the beach and just kind of just clearing your head is so important, so that you can be prepared for anything.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's meditation. Like I like to start my morning, with a cup of coffee, and I just try to meditate, and I go through this prayer that I do, and it always means something, different every day based on just what's going on in my life. And it prepares me for whatever the world is throwing at me,
It sets the tone.
Yeah, it really does. And if I feel like I had a good meditation session, I can be Superwoman. I can take anything. And I think with it's like you have to do that as well, because it's like whether you're flying an hour or 7 hours, or you're reporting something really big or something, you have to be prepared for anything. And there's an element of just having to be so ready for that.
And every day is different. I don't always wake up in a great mood.
Yeah.
I might wake up on the wrong side of the bed one day. I might not feel that well. I might be, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And getting that time, especially here in Southern California, where we have such great weather, and just getting outside for fresh air will completely straighten me out.
But even like the boundaries and knowing when to say, hey, I need to basically take a break. Like, we were supposed to do this interview, almost like, a month ago.
Yeah.
But you were under the weather, and you said, like, I need to take care of time for me. How do you, that's a great example, but just talk about how you try to set boundaries with other, responsibilities, other things, so that you can actually be really focused when you're, because not every day you're great waking up in the best mood, or you're sick, or you're maybe you're feeling a little low. So what do you do when on those days you're not at the top?
It's a constant effort, right? It's time management, but when you have an odd schedule, it's even that much more challenging. But I really have to get in the zone, regardless of what's happening at work. When I'm home, work is at work because the news is over, and I'm focused on whatever I'm doing with this, whether it's with the family or by myself, and vice versa. When I get to work, I really have to let go of everything else, unless there's an emergency, obviously. But I am, especially in the helicopter, I'm in a bubble.
Yeah.
So I'm literally and figuratively in a zone where I just am in full concentration mode.
And do you think that is kind of what you're like, how you balance your work and your personal life is like when you are in your when it's family time, like it's family time, you're not thinking about work, you're not really focused. Are you watching news and when you're like focused on work, I mean, you can't really have your, I mean, unless for emergencies, you really can't be really focusing.
I still consume a lot of news. Don't get me wrong. My wife will tell you stories about that. I mean, I watch a lot of news, not a lot of news even at home. But it's obviously it's different. It's more out of enjoyment because I love it, right? Yeah. So I am very lucky that I love what I do, but part of what I do, whether it's at work or at home, is stay informed about what's going on in the world. That's where I find, instead of meditation,
you like to absorb.
I absorb. Yeah, that's interesting. It's constant intake of whatever's going on in the world. Yeah.
And how do you think that, is it just something that's innate in you? Because like I have found that for me, like I kind of have to keep a low information diet.
A lot of people.
Because it's too much stuff, too much stimulation.
Yeah.
And do you think, I mean, I think that's probably because I'm also kind of an introvert.
Yeah, but it's very common. Really? And I have this news bug, like a lot of people that I work with, that if you were to put me on a deserted island without my phone, that's a problem. I cannot relax.
That's so. And is that just based on like our personality? Do you think it comes down to that? Would you say you're an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm probably more introverted than I am an extrovert, but I love socializing. Yeah. But at the same time,
you love that you love that.
The older I get, the more I really enjoy my alone time.
Yeah. How are you? Like, how do you spend your alone time other than just your the walks? Do you do other things? Are you into exercise?
I like to exercise.
What do you do?
I love running. I love biking. I mean, especially down in the South Bay, we just have the best views down there. So I love biking.
Is that where you live? Okay, in the South Bay, nice.
Yeah.
There's some great bikes there. Like the only biking trail I know of is the Strand, basically, which is a beautiful biking trail.
Which is great. And there's so many places where I can also catch up with friends, which is also important. It's very easy. When you get wrapped up in a career and you obviously have your family life, it's easy to lose that contact with your friends. And I really make a conscious effort to maintain that as well.
That's really important too as part of balance. It's not just like, it's not just your significant other and your child, but like it's also
all of your relationships.
Do you feel like you've maintained a good relationships with your friends?
Absolutely.
And can you talk about like what you do with your friends? Is it biking?
We talk about, we catch up on life. I mean, some friends I see more than others, and some friends are back east, so I have to make time on the phone with them and build that into my schedule as well, or whether it's during my commute or, finding time at night, even though it's different time zones, obviously, but that's important too.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that having just relationships with your friends is really, really important.
It's important and healthy.
Yeah, no. I want to focus a little bit on like the importance of good news. Like one of the things I've been reading a lot about now is just what's this term called trauma porn. And it's just like I know so many people who are into just negative news. They want to see it, and in fact a lot of like news organizations are really like push that because that's what gets the clicks,
especially online.
Right, exactly. So where do you see good news fitting into a news story? And is that news? I mean, it goes back to the definition of like, what is news?
Sure.
What should be considered news? And how do, I see about like these wildfires, that should be news. But then I hear like of a community story of like kids planting 500 trees in South LA. And I'm thinking, should that be news? Is the antithesis of just the wildfires? And but it goes back to, is that news? And is that news organizations, there's they have a job too. They're it's a profit. It's about they want to get the views and the clicks. So where do you feel like good news that's maybe not as exciting, but it's also, I don't know, I just think that it's part of what makes it's the balance of just humanity. Humanity isn't all about all these like negative extreme car chases and shootings.
It's not all bad news. There's a lot of good news out there, and that balance, which is important. And unfortunately, it's found more in local news than it is in our national news diet, because the national news is so politically driven and so, I mean, there's a lot of tragedy that needs to be covered. So you don't hear about as much good news on a national stage as much as you do on the local news, where it is much more common. And whether it's, it's all part of a balanced news diet. You have to kind of take it all in.
What is a balanced news diet?
Well, I think a balanced news diet includes not just the weather, not just the traffic, not just the bad news, but also the good news, the community stories that you're talking about, the entertainment news. It's all news. It is news. And that's, some people focus on just, ESPN if you want to, take in sports news, or just entertainment if you want to take in entertainment news. But it's important, I think, and especially in a world of podcasts, to have a balanced diet of podcasts, or news viewing habits, or books, or magazines.
What would you say has been like your most memorable good news story to report in your career as a helicopter reporter?
You mentioned the Miracle on the Hudson.
Well, for people who don't know the Miracle on the Hudson, describe that.
So the Miracle on the Hudson was a U.S. Airways plane that landed in the Hudson River on a cold January day. I think we're going back to 2009.
2009, yeah.
And Captain Sully Sullenberger miraculously landed the plane in the river with 155 people on board, and everybody survived.
Wow.
It was truly a miracle, but in that moment, we did not know how it was going to end. We just saw a lot of people standing on this plane in frigid temperatures. Miraculously, the plane did not sink. It did not, tip over. It floated the way it was designed, but everybody survived. And so at the end of this, what could have been a complete disaster or a crash, ended up being this amazingly great day where everybody, I don't even think there were any major injuries. It was truly, a happy ending, which is very rare in a world where we're constantly covering, tragic news.
And do you think is there more opportunities like that to cover good news? Maybe that, or like even maybe that's not even so, as dramatic as that, but something that's a little bit more like middle of the road, or is it not as possible, you think?
I mean, we don't make the news, we just tell the news, right?
Do you think that's true? I mean, do you really? Because I do think there's an element of there's a power you have as a newsmaker.
I don't consider us newsmakers. I think
medium. I mean,
we give attention to news makers.
It's where you're focusing your energies on.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think if you really look at the overall, now there's a lot to be said for the order that news is presented, and you can get into a whole other discussion about, where does good news rank in terms of most importance, and, what deserves to be the top story or what deserves to be on the front page. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But it all ends up out there, whether it's on the website, whether it's on our streaming channels, whether it's on television. We now have more opportunities than ever to tell more, to give that audience that diverse news diet. And we do. And we have, amazing programming on our streaming channel, for example, where we have a program called Localish that runs throughout the day. And we get to tell stories about community events and new restaurants and new businesses that are popping up around town, and all kinds of, great, happy stories that we didn't used to have the opportunity to tell in a limited, linear television environment.
Coming up with how you're going to present news when you're working with your production team, do they think about what's the balanced news diet today? Or is that what's the process of how they determine what gets top stories versus this is going to go down?
So that's a little above my pay grade. But when we go on assignment, it's whatever's happening. Okay. I mean, and we don't know. It could be, there's plenty of good news that we cover every day. And sometimes, you don't know how the story is going to end. A lot of the stories that we're covering are breaking. They're literally happening before our eyes. Even a police chase. A police chase might look like a terrifying thing on television, but if it ends with the bad guy going to jail and the child who was kidnapped back in his mother's arms, that's a good news story at the end of the day. Is. And we see that all the time. Stories like that. It looks like the house is burning down, but the firefighters went in and saved a whole family and the dog. It is tragic that they lost their house, but at the end of the day, it was a good news story. They don't all end up with happy endings. But that's not up to us. We're just covering what's happening.
Do you ever get told, do you get told, I want to cover this event, but there's another event that somebody else is covering or something, you can't cover that event for a certain reason? Does that happen often?
It occasionally does, but really, we're very fortunate. We have 3 helicopters at ABC7.
Nice.
So that allows us, with our little
to do
Air Force, to cover pretty much everything. Wherever we need to be, we figure out a way to, especially in a big market like Los Angeles, we figure out a way to cover it, which is...
And are there favorite things you try to cover versus, are there other news reporters they have a certain beat?
I like to cover what's happening now.
Okay. The live breaking.
The other reporters can come in later and figure out, what happened while we were up in the air kind of delivering the breaking details to the public.
Yeah.
But I like being where the news is actually happening now.
Right there. And just what is it like to be on, up in the air reporting? It's a different experience. You talked about the ground, the ground reporters. They have a different perspective. But how is that different from being up in the air, reporting up in the air?
Well, you get a different vantage point.
Right.
It's a different perspective.
Yeah.
And sometimes, a lot of details that, a lot of the story that I'm telling has a lot of blanks in it. Mm. And so it's important that we get there on the ground to fill in those blanks. Mm-hmm. But the viewpoint that we have is important because that's the first view that people are going to have of that event. Mm-hmm. Is that, because we can get there before anybody else, we're going to deliver the first pictures of that plane in the river with people standing on the wing, being rescued, or, a house, going up in flames and a fire encroaching on a whole neighborhood, where people have to evacuate, and we have to get that information out really rapidly. And a lot of times it's life-saving information, so that's, all part of the job. But from the air, you could do that almost more efficiently with more accuracy, especially with the tools that we have at our disposal. And technology, we are able to do things that we weren't able to do just a few years ago in that respect.
And I'm even sure you've seen just what you're reporting is different. I'm sure we've had so many wildfires in the recent years. Mm-hmm. So you are actually, I'm sure you're seeing a shift in the kind of news you're reporting.
Yeah.
And what has been your perspective of just climate change from your vantage point and having to now report wildfires after wildfires, and it's becoming a lot more frequent.
Yeah, we see it in real time. And I grew up with hurricanes in Florida. Yeah. And out here it's wildfires. That is the scary thing about living, for folks that do live, near the forest or, near any kind of brush. We covered the Woolsey fire in Malibu a couple of years ago. That was really frightening. We've had countless fires since then, and they are becoming more frequent and more unpredictable for firefighters than in the past.
Really?
So they have to devote more resources, and that, gives us the opportunity, again, to tell that story and show, it's not like it used to be. When there's a fire now, especially in Los Angeles, there are a dozen helicopters and airplanes over it within minutes, So that's how they're battling, now compared to a few years ago where you didn't have as many resources needed.
When did you notice
we
that?
see a lot of that.
Like, when did you notice? I was like, wow, like I'm covering a lot more wildfires than I ever have before. I mean, I'm sure that was always, covering natural disasters has always been something you've had to do, when working in Florida. But I'm sure there was a point where you realized that there was like, this is happening a lot more common now.
It has definitely, in the last 10 years, the numbers have skyrocketed. In the last couple of years, ironically, because of climate change, the fire seasons are more unpredictable. For the last 2 seasons, we've had below average fires because we're in October now and it's like June gloom, where normally this would be the heart of fire season. So it takes firefighters themselves are having a harder time predicting when fire season is, how to equip, how to, schedule their manpower. So they have to be on guard 24/7 all year long. And, they're investing in more equipment, more helicopters in the air, more technology to map the fires. It's a big business, but it's life-saving stuff that we get to see from the helicopter.
Mm-hmm. What do you think us Angelenos can do? I mean, is there anything we can do?
It's not much you could do when Mother Nature is posing that kind of a threat. But as the years go by, I think we're going to see less people living in those vulnerable spots, less insurance companies covering those properties. It's going to be harder to get a mortgage near those danger zones. So it's going to have long-term economic consequences for decades to come.
And as a father, you look at, 20, 25 years, your daughter, and like what this world will be like for her. How do you think about that?
I think about it all the time.
Do you really?
I think that's one of the things that stresses because of what I do.
Yeah.
I think about that all the time.
Really?
And all I can do is arm her with the knowledge, as she grows up to be, the best human being she could be to, be ready for that new world.
Like, what do you think? What knowledge do you want to impart on her?
I just want her to be a strong individual woman who, is able to, it's really important to me, especially, the younger generations growing up now and her generation, to be able to be media savvy in terms of where they get their information. How do you determine what's truth and what's not? Where are your facts coming from? Because that's the only way we're going to survive as a species is if we all are operating on the same set of facts.
So what is like,
and that is important.
How do we determine what's truth? I mean, because there is like any company can now say, I'm a news source. I mean, how do you determine what is truth and versus?
You have to do your homework. And most people don't have the time to do their homework. They barely have time to, click on a story on Twitter to read the full article, let alone do their homework on who wrote the article and where that information is coming from and where those sources sourced out. I mean, that's what takes extra energy. I think that's what this next generation is going to start to figure out. I would love to see, media training start much earlier in grade school.
Really?
I think that's going to be an important part of the curriculum in the coming years.
What is media training, would you say exactly?
Being able to decipher truth from lies. I mean, there's just so many sources. We are inundated with information all day long from all different angles. I mean, and it's a lot of it's coming in the palm of your hand, and it's very different than the way it used to be. It's harder to determine, a New York Times article from an offshoot that is pretending to be a valid news source. Right? They all look the same when you're scrolling. And so it's something that needs to be addressed, I think.
Yeah, no, it's making sure you understand the sources too of where people are getting these.
You used to have 3 networks. Now there's a balkanization of media sources.
I also think there is this, this lack of ability to take long form news and just kind of get a little bit more deeper, because that's when you can really see whether there is truth in someone's reporting versus just propaganda.
It's a big part of it.
But I'm also seeing it's a lot of people's attention span is very short. They don't really want to read the 1,000-word article that reports on something. They just want the highlights,
They're
video. Yes. And do you see that? And do you think that's a problem with
It is, but hopefully the crowdsourcing will take care of some of that, right?
Okay.
I mean, I think there's ways to get the right publications and news outlets, at the top in front of the most people. And I think over time, I hope that viewers and audiences will be able to determine those, the difference.
So you talk about,
But it's a hope. I mean, we have
is.
to make an effort as a society to care enough
Right.
to do it, because as it is, there's less people getting into journalism for various reasons as it is.
Why is
And
do you
that's
think it's because it's
it's a business, and it is not the days of the $1 million news anchor have gone away. I mean, it's just a different, it's taking a different form, but there's so many opportunities, whether you're a podcaster or a blogger. I mean, there's so many different ways to reach the audience.
I think in a way it's,
which makes it less profitable.
That's true. I mean, news making has it's almost been more democratized.
Yes.
But it's also, it's like if you have an iPhone and you're near a scene, like you can be, cover that breaking story for a day, but it's also, just there's not a real strong like chain of just hierarchy, like what and how your
there's
career.
A confusion over what a journalist is. Like,
right.
People like to use the term citizen journalist, for somebody that whips out their phone and, starts recording video. That's not a journalist. I mean, that's somebody telling a story, but that's not a journalist. A journalist, as we talked about, really requires a certain degree of training and fact-based, research. And that takes, it's not as easy as just taking out your phone and typing away or taking pictures.
So to our viewers here who are watching this, who basically want to follow into your footsteps 20 years from now and become a helicopter reporter for ABC News, like what steps would you tell them to take now? If they're like a young, let's just say, let's just, are people watching this? I mean, they're, they're young, 20-year-old person wants to get into
the best thing a young journalist can do today is consume everything.
Really?
Consume everything. Because if you consume a lot, then it becomes much easier.
Really?
To decide.
So you don't think it's almost like going to be overwhelming to consume everything? Because I mean,
not if that's what you want to do. It's not for everybody.
Okay.
But if that's the career path you want to take, you have to take in everything, and decide for yourself, what your passion is. Because there's all, as we talked about, all kinds of journalists now, all kinds of reporting. I think we're going to go back to more beat reporting. I mean, I think that's something that's been lost over the years, where general assignment reporters are thrown from one genre to another story, and it's harder to really build those sources and get knee deep in the details when you don't have a real mastery of that specific field or topic or beat. I think you're seeing a lot more beat reporters now.
So focused on a beat. So is also, what is a beat that you're really interested in?
Because then you can build a brand.
Yeah.
I'm a reputable sports reporter, or I'm a reputable entertainment reporter, or I'm a reputable political reporter.
And how important is it now to have a media platform to attach yourself to? Because I think that's where a lot of, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Fox, ABC, these are all very reputable platforms. But I also think that's like, those are if you're a trusted journalist, you're going either you're going to want to maybe gravitate towards that. But then there's also journalists who basically want to be like, I want to have, like, for example, myself, my own podcast. So what's, if someone wants to go towards a platform that's just a big name platform, what do they need to do?
Be prepared.
Okay.
Especially if you're not affiliated with an institutional outlet that has a strong editorial process, then individual journalists have to be prepared to, spell out their sourcing. It can't just be, XYZ. It's got to be, here's where XYZ came from. Here's where this information was developed. Here's how we know this to be true. Because somewhere along the line, there has to be an editorial process that the audience can trust, not just one person, talking on the radio or a podcast or on a Substack.
So it's basically developing your sources and then just making sure that if you're going to be working with like a major news outlet,
the major news outlets have that built into the process, right? You have a newsroom with hundreds of people. You have editors, managing editors, lawyers looking at everything before it goes out and into the wild. It's a machine, and it's built to, it's built to stand the test of scrutiny, when facts are contested, which they are being contested more than ever before. It's much harder the smaller the outlet, or especially for an individual.
So is it possible for an individual, a photojournalist, a journalist, let's say my goal is to become a helicopter journalist. Mm-hmm. Is it easier to now get into that machine?
Harder than ever.
It's really,
no, I think it's harder than ever. I mean, for a helicopter journalist, I think it's yet to be determined what the future of helicopter journalism is. And I do consider it a form of journalism. Some people don't, but I do. But it's something that's very expensive that the main the main TV stations and news outlets can afford.
Do you think that drones would you consider drone reporting kind of a competition, or is it complementary?
I don't consider it competition. There's definitely a space for it, especially in smaller news markets. But here in LA, I don't think that's really a viable way to cover the news, just because of the area, the size of the city, and the the nature of the news that we cover.
Exactly. It's all you want to be up. People want to see you.
But I wish every city had a few helicopters able to do what we do here, and they just, as time goes on, it's becoming less affordable for a lot of TV stations to support. Right. So that's something that's a little bit.
Well, it all goes back to money. I mean, it's like the news stations, like it's based on still advertising revenue, and advertising revenue is like what people watch, and then what people want to watch is the trauma porn, and then how do you all balance like all of that?
That's right. So it's very complicated. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy. But you think it's harder now. So if you're like a young 25-year-old, just graduated from like a journalism degree from a top school, you want to go work at ABC News, like you have
the opportunity to get in the helicopter, great, but it is not a thriving business.
So how would you, what advice would you have to like a young college graduate who wants to get into just journalism at one of these, Fox or ABC?
Learn the language, learn to write, and get yourself, in front of the right people. It's all about networking and, building that foundation of being able to determine fact from fiction. So having that ability to be resourceful and use sources to gather information and tell stories. That's what it's all about at its core. And that's what it always has been, but it's more important than ever before because anybody could say they're a journalist. And that's not necessarily journalism.
Did you have mentors throughout your career at these organizations that kind of helped you or gave you assignments that maybe you weren't quite ready for? But
especially in local news, for sure.
Really. So that's another way too, is start out at local news before to get into like LA markets, New York markets, start at these.
Absolutely.
And then also is, I think, when you have these gambles, these opportunities to cover something that may or may not happen, I mean, you
have to be ready to take advantage of those opportunities when they come, because like we said, the timing is literally, a huge part of it. It's obviously, you have to have the skills and the training and the wherewithal, but putting yourself in the right place at the right time to take advantage of those opportunities is just as important.
I've always said timing and position is everything.
It's everything.
Okay, we're going to end with a few top easy questions. What would you say are your top 3 healthiest habits?
My healthiest habits. Well, like I said, I've been drinking a lot more water.
That's great.
So that's important. Like I said, I try every day to get to the beach because that to me is, and it keeps me active. I love riding my bike, and that is something that I did not do, living back east, and that's something that I absolutely love.
Okay.
and just spending as much time with my family. I
love that.
Yeah.
I think they love that.
That's really healthy.
So I have a principle that says part of balance is having healthy vices, things that are not necessarily healthy for you, but they bring you great joy. Like mine is food and poker. Well, I love it, but I got to keep it in just manageable doses.
Yep, I hear that. Like I said, I'm a big foodie, so I'm with you on the food. Yeah, big foodies in our house.
Good. So you understand.
So that's important. Like I said, I listen to a lot of podcasts, sometimes too many. I just get so consumed. I have a list of podcasts. I get anxiety when I don't make it to all of them because, like I said, I'm starving for all that intake of information. But sometimes I need to just listen to music.
I get it.
And it's like, I have to remind myself, just put on some music.
Yeah. I think that's great. And then sometimes I actually like taking long road trips. I went to downtown LA last night from Santa Monica.
Oh, I love driving.
I just put a podcast and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm taking a long road trip so that I could listen to a podcast.
That's great. Yeah. Especially here in LA where the drives are so beautiful, right?
It really.
Yeah.
It's getting better. I love the drives.
I love driving. I'm one of the, I don't love sitting in traffic, but
I think it's just one of the things about living in LA. Like people I know people, I live in Santa Monica, and they're like, oh, I won't go, east of the 405. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like you don't get the beauty of LA if you aren't willing to drive around. Yes, that's when you get really the joy, see the beauty of LA. And it's, and that's also kind of cool. It's just like because traffic, Biden is in town. So traffic has been really heavy in general. But I'm kind of like our president of the United States is in town. Of course, traffic is going to be heavier. So there's just a joy of living in this city, but also recognizing that, there's a lot of other people who love it too. So
it's a good week to be in the helicopter, though.
I bet it is. What are you going to be reporting? What would you say you're going to be reporting?
Well, this is one of those times where we can't do much flying when the president's in town. There's a flight restriction wherever he goes.
Wow.
So between the weather outside and the president in town, it's a time to catch up on other stuff. Okay. Yeah.
So what would you say are small things, this whole podcast is about balance.
Yeah.
Like what would you say you do? What are the small things you like to do every day to bring balance into your life, to prepare yourself for your family responsibilities, your work responsibilities, your own personal health, mental health, physical health? Mm-hmm. What are the things you do? You mentioned the walk, just to get you to that state of just having equanimity.
Oh, that is a huge part of my day. Waking up, getting that coffee in me, and catching up on the day's news early so I could take my walk, get outside, and then from there, I'm ready. And that kind of sets the table for the rest of the day.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
What does wealth mean to you?
Such a great question. I think the definition of wealth has changed as I've gotten older. It just, you think of money when you first think of the word, but it's so much deeper than that. It's being healthy. Health is wealth, and it sounds like the cheesiest phrase. And the older you get, the more you appreciate how accurate it is. Yeah. Having those bonds with those around you, the relationships, nurturing those relationships, and being able to enjoy those relationships and in a healthy way, that's wealth. That's, because it could all end tomorrow.
It's true.
Right.
Tomorrow is not promised.
That's right.
Chris, thank you so much for being here.
It's exciting. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. What is there anything you would like to leave our viewers with?
This was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
So you can find me at ABC7 Cristi on Instagram and Twitter and on TikTok.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
To my fans, thank you for watching. I love you. I love you so much. Until next time.